Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. It is another beautiful Monday. We are in March 2025, March 3rd to be exact. We are starting our next session of Roadmap for a Moral Society. So, one thing to share with you, we are at session number 113. Our topic today is the station of man and that of the believer. With that being said, we invite all of you who are just joining us on this journey to view the playlist that is found on YouTube or on Facebook that will show you the rest of the videos that we have posted. 111 other sessions that you can find right now online. Just a quick
112.
Wait, did I say 100? Yeah, 112 other sessions, even better. 112 other sessions. Over 2 years of content, everyone. We've had some beautiful souls who have joined us on this journey from the beginning, and they're still here with us. There are some people who have joined us throughout the sessions we've had. We're so happy to have all of you here. Now, if you're interested in sharing this, you're more than welcome to on our YouTube page. If you want to share the Zoom link, please go to clearwaterbaha'is.org and find our Zoom link under the Activities tab. You'll find our roadmap sessions for Mondays at 8 p.m. The link for Zoom posted there. So without much further ado, just one last piece. Everyone here, they're sharing their personal ideas, their opinions. We are individuals, whether we're Baha'i or not, sharing our ideas together here. And we start our days, our sessions, focusing on spiritual qualities. And we start that by having an opening prayer. So to begin, we'll start with our opening prayer. And our opening prayer will help us frame our discussion as we discuss today's topic, which is the station of man and that of the believer. So we hope that Armin is ready with his opening prayer. Of course, anyone's
Yes.
able to volunteer. We just had Armin volunteer very quickly, so we're very happy for him to do that. Thank you,
Oh,
Armin.
but if anybody else wants to, of course. Anybody going once, twice? I'll start. O God, my God, I have set out from my home, holding fast unto the cord of thy love, and I have committed myself wholly to thy care and to thy protection. I entreat thee by thy power through which thou did protect thy loved ones from the wayward and perverse, and from every contumacious oppressor and every wicked doer who hath strayed from thee, to keep me safe by thy bounty and thy grace. Enable me then to return to my home by thy power and thy might. Thou art truly the Almighty, the help in peril, the self-subsisting. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Armin. Can we have a volunteer reader start with?
I'll go ahead and volunteer if you need.
Thank you, Terry.
Yes, sir. Let it not be conceived that the House of Justice taketh any decision according to its own lights and notions. I beg forgiveness from God. The Universal House of Justice enforceth decisions and enacteth laws through the inspiration and assistance of the Holy Spirit. For it is under the protection, tutelage, and preservation of the ancient beauty. Whatsoever it decideth, obedience thereto is an unquestionable duty and binding obligation under all, from which there is absolutely no escape for anyone.
Any thoughts from anyone regarding this quote?
Well, as a former member of the Air Force, it's, you know, it's like being in the military. You have your officers, you're enlisted, and, you know, you have your individuals who are in command. And Abdul Baha has likened us to the, I guess, what you call the Army of Light. And Baha'u'llah is the supreme commander, so to speak. And it's just, you know, we obey his orders without question. Now we can, if we ask questions, it's try to understand what do these orders actually mean. It's just, I guess, through consultation and discussion, we try to educate ourselves to wrap our tiny little brains around the importance of the words of Baha'u'llah and how they apply to today's world. And the Universal House of Justice is like, you know, the enforcement agency, so to speak. They enforce the rulings, so to speak. At least that's the way I look at it.
Okay, lovely. I just would like to make some comments here. In regards to, let it not be conceived that the House of Justice taketh any decision according to its own lights and notions. So I think that's really, really important. I think it's important because I don't think before this revelation, well, there has been, but in this current revelation for people who are not Baha'is, what is assured to each of us through conferred infallibility, wow, that's a biggie, that Universal House of Justice doesn't just draw from its own notions. It actually has guidance in the Kitabi Aqdas. It has a book of laws, and it has myriad of tablets in regards to just about every subject on the planet. So it draws its inspiration from the word of Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, and the beloved guardian, and then it consults and it makes a consensus decision according to that. And thereby any, what would you say, any kind of influence whatsoever can't sit there because they're drawing from written testimony and guidance, not only in the spiritual sense, but in a practical legislative sense as well. So I just wanted to make that very clear. And of course, yes, the Holy Spirit is part of that because the founder, there are two founders, the Bab and Baha'u'llah. But under Baha'u'llah's guidance, his presence may not be here, but his word, which is a creative word of God, is a living, breathing entity, and it gives life and it gives healing. So the members, which there are 9 Universal House of Justice members, draw off both the written word and the spirit, meaning the effulgences of the blessed beauty in which to decision make. So, you know, pretty much like 99%, that would be pretty good in decision making. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
If I'm be as bold to add something to that, it's just like if you want to do a comparison contrast to a court decision, let's say that, you know, you have a court decision here in the United States, you have, you know, the circuit court, the judge, you know, looks at the law and he makes an interpretation of the law. And it's just, you know, it's, you know, to me, I mean, if we can compare a man-made institution to the divine inspiration of Baha'u'llah, it's like, I mean, there's really no comparison. But, you know, the Universal House of Justice, you know, it's a 9 men in the Universal House of Justice. And, you know, to me, you're talking about a body that's even superior to the Supreme Court of the United States because they're the Universal House of Justice. We're talking about, you know, God Almighty, so to speak. Or, you know, and it's just, you know, to me, their laws are more supreme than the U.S. Constitution, so to speak, if you want to, you know, draw parallels and such. But like I said, it's just an observation, my little, tiny little opinion, but that's the way I see it.
Thanks, Terry. Any other comments or questions about this particular quote? And I agree with Terry. It whatsoever it decideth obedience thereunto thereto is an unquestionable duty and binding obligation upon all, from which there is absolutely no escape for anyone. So that's a pretty bold statement. Can we have a reader for the next? A volunteer? All right, I'll start.
Right.
Say, O people, the universal house of justice is under the wing of your Lord, the compassionate, the all-merciful. That is, under his preservation, tutelage, protection, and watchful care, for he hath commanded the well-assured believers to obey that goodly and pure band, that sanctified and victorious company, inasmuch as its sovereignty is heavenly and merciful, and its ordinances are inspired and spiritual. I'll go ahead and read the next one. The universal house of justice, if it be established under the necessary conditions, with members elected from all the people, that house of justice will be under the protection and the unerring guidance of God. If that house of justice shall decide unanimously or by a majority upon any question not mentioned in the book, that decision and command will be guarded from mistake. Now the members of the house of justice have not individually essential infallibility, but the body of the house of justice is under the protection and unerring guidance of God. This is called conferred infallibility. So, do we have any thoughts on what was just read here?
My thinking is that I think Shoghi Effendi, before he had the Universal House of Justice elected, he wanted to make sure that the spreading of Baha'u'llah's teaching were over every continent on the planet. And I think, his unerring wisdom, he didn't, there was never a Universal House of Justice, during his lifetime, due to the fact that we were busy, during the Crusades, his teaching crusades were, Shoghi Effendi was appointing believers to open up areas for teaching and get more people, to get more believers, because according to what I understand, it's just like when they elect the Universal House of Justice, it's like, is it like once every 5 years you have national assemblies send their delegates? I mean, if you have, I don't, is it the entire National Assembly that elects the Universal House of Justice, or does the National Assembly send the delegate to the International Convention? I'm just not too clear on how the election process goes on. It's something I'm a little bit fuzzy on.
I was just going to say, Terry, sorry. Actually, all national assemblies elect delegates and send them to the World Centre, and then they vote and elect the members of the House of Justice. Just to add that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Sharon. I thank you for clarifying that. And it's just like, okay, it's an international republic, so to speak, but this is okay. So this is something that's according to the teachings of Baha'u'llah and the guidance of Shoghi Effendi and Abdul Baha. So that's basically where we are at today. concerning the Universal House of Justice. And we're very fortunate that Baha'u'llah was able to lay out the framework explicitly, and Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi were able to, fill in some of the details during their lifetimes. And then I guess when the first House of Justice was elected in 1963, there was enough members in the world such that the Universal House of Justice was able to be elected in 1963, which I find rather fascinating and very heartwarming, so to speak.
I want to add here one thought. A good friend of mine who's a well-known author that most of us know, names not need to be mentioned, spent 4 years on writing a book on infallibility. And finally it was done, sent it to the book review and to the House of Justice for approval. And the House of Justice came back and said it's not timely. And his book, as yet, on infallibility has been published. So, based on that experience, I think that the topic of infallibility is still a sensitive one, because after all, you have to remember the Pope has infallibility. The Jehovah's Witness, their governing body, claims infallibility. Reverend Moon claims infallibility. So there are a lot of what I call religious bodies out there whose head or leadership all claim infallibility. So and as it clearly states, this is not about the members. This is about when the body is in session, right? During the session and decision making, is when that infallibility occurs. So, but it's a very interesting topic, and apparently not one yet to go worldwide in a book that was, oh my God, took forever to write. So that's all I want to add.
And can I just add to that, coming from the quotation? It actually says in the quotation that okay, so what it also points out that when the members of the Universal House of Justice are not in session, they walk about normally. It doesn't confer an individual station or, a special, how would you say, mantle on the individual members once they leave the meeting. That's one point. And the other point is that I think, despite the fact that that bestowed infallibility is a controversial subject out in the old world and probably in our world, I'd like to say that, isn't it wonderful that they say here that the House of Justice will be under the protection and unerring guidance, therefore its decisions. The decisions in command will be guarded from mistake. Now, you see, to me, that's really, really important. So if you're an individual or a community or whatever, but say if you're an individual and you have to make a decision, and it's a huge decision, and it doesn't just involve you, you can draw on the consultative process through these institutions, and in this case, the Universal House of Justice would have to be pretty huge to go there. However, when the decision is made, the fact is that you can, whether you like it or not, if you obey it, you know that you're protected from error. And, I haven't heard of anything. I've heard people make, statements and all this, but, this is a new day. And what an amazing protection for each of us and our communities to know that this unerring guidance, that we can actually, whether or not we think it's right or wrong, thank God we have a body that makes that decision for us to keep us safe, is my point. Thank you.
Sharon, that's actually a really interesting thought because it just dawned on me. So if the world in unison were to ask the Universal House of Justice what the solution should be for these, these conflicts and struggles between, different individuals in different countries in the world, and if they just collectively did what the Universal House of Justice, that would be the correct answer.
Well, we're waiting, Jeremiah. Great will be the day. Yep.
So are there any other thoughts or comments on these? If not, I guess we'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah, Jeremiah.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, John.
So when we're talking about this unanimous or majority vote, do people know what that means?
From what I understand, according to, Robert's Rules of Order, a simple majority is 50% plus one vote. So if you're talking about the Universal House of Justice, you're talking about a 5-4 decision. Unanimous means 9-0. So if you're talking about just a simple majority would be 5-4. And that's according to what I understand.
You've got a
I think that's
nine
correct.
to nine.
Come again?
What I was trying to, sorry, I'm sorry, I get excited about this stuff. The fact is you've got a 9-9, so you've got a unanimous decision. So how much more security is that for, for decision making, is my point.
Well, the thing is, if you look at Congress, if you look at certain things in Congress, some of it requires a simple majority, that's 50% plus one vote. Sometimes you have to have a decision that's called a supermajority, and a supermajority involves a 2/3, 2/3 vote. So 2/3 say yes, 1/3 says no. So it, to me, that's the difference between a simple majority and a supermajority. And unanimous, I mean, it's 9-0. So, yeah.
The idea of this conferred infallibility. So if the members meet and there's a decision made by the body, the concept of this conferred infallibility, that the elements, the necessary conditions are met. Therefore, because those conditions are met, infallibility is conferred. That is an interesting concept of it being created due to the conditions existing, whereas, again, one person, two people, again, people just on the street, it's not the same thing. It's this institution that is formed where these members assemble and vote. And again, there's a process, right? It's not just a voting process where someone puts forth an idea and then everyone votes. It seems where the members of Congress were alluded to, the American Congress, that it would be prudent to explain that the process is very different, right? So what's something that they engage in when they first meet before the subject is even discussed?
Prayer.
You talking about the Universal House of Justice?
Yes, as opposed to other institutions that you find in the world where conferred
Right.
infallibility is not given explicitly, again, in a holy book. As Sharon, I think, said, I believe we start with prayer. Is that right, Sharon?
Correct.
Yes,
So
that is correct.
so following starting with prayer, what else goes on? What happens in order for this process to begin, continue, and conclude?
Fact finding, and then reference to the writings. and exploring all the facts and weighing it up, and and also searching the writings for guidance from there as well. That's, just a basic part of the process. And then discussion, consultation.
So the idea of consulting the writings, can you allude to some processes, or can you describe it more clearly, what you mean by consulting the writings, please?
Yes, what I mean is that there are texts, there is scripture and guidance, there are a book of laws, there is a whole scaffolding and framework for decision making, given conferred infallibility, that the Universal House of Justice members can reference once they've ascertained what the problem is. They can actually turn for guidance to the scriptural framework, and seek the answers and the remedy from that framework, is my point. I hope that's clear. Sorry if it's ambiguous.
Well, something that is intriguing, this concept of consultation and consulting the writings. If there's this discussion going on, and there's consultation on the writings where they read some passages, and then after doing more research, they find another passage that changes the direction of that discussion. It seems that because this is spiritual consultation that they're engaging in, that the members will wholeheartedly accept and move on with that new added understanding. I mentioned this in the context of Abdul Baha from Semester Questions, speaking about spiritual consultation and the first disciples of Jesus. That exchange that he describes, the consultation that they engaged in, and the result, which was their dispersal and teaching the faith of Christ in the beginning of the Christian religion. This concept of spiritual consultation appearing in the annals of Baha'i history throughout the tenure of every member of the Universal House of Justice, abiding by that concept of spiritual consultation, and truly maintaining a sense of unity that comes from a united purpose, and most importantly, adherence and obedience to the laws of God, as was mentioned by the members of this discussion today. It seems that there are a lot of elements that we can discuss now and in another session in other places more fully. And I say this because there's a consultation compilation as well, because consultation is a Baha'i law. There are a lot of explanations about how consultation is to occur. Just to, I guess, close this point, one of the amazing concepts, these elements that we need in consultation, however they factor in as to how people use them, we need to be united in our purpose to consult, to attain this truth that we're seeking, and at the same time be willing to act on it. We need to have love for each other because of God, love for every single person in that room. We need to have patience and compassion. Patience, of course, some people won't say things we like to hear. Compassion, some people may say things that we find personally hurtful. We all have our own identities, our own egos, and our own feelings. We may say something, and when people speak to us, they say things we don't like to hear. Perhaps we identify with what we're hearing in a negative way. Love, patience, compassion, and of course, unity. This concept of being united, to have this unity to characterize our experience, where depending on the level of unity we have, sometimes the lack of communication on some things because it's already understood. It's something that's really important to consider, this idea of how much unity affects us and how we communicate with one another. Can anyone maybe before we move on reflect on this concept of being so united, like birds in the sky, where they don't talk to one another, but they still fly in the same direction? Anyone reflect maybe on that, like how peace on an institution would be able to engage with that type of unity?
I think, John, unity is a growing process. I think the way you know, a lot of people got some pretty kumbaya ideas about what unity actually is. But the reality is that if each individual believer turns their faith to the blessed beauty, does their obligatory prayers, works hard on their own personal spiritualization, because, you know, we have been gifted two things. One, the independent investigation of truth has set us free. And why at this stage in humanity do we have that? We have no clergy. We are set free, but we're not set free to fall in the hole. What happens is we have to turn to the manifestation of God for this day through prayer, and seek guidance from that. And when we do go in to consult with people, hopefully in that meeting, everybody will be saying, well, what would Baha'u'llah do? What would Abdul-Baha do? What is this problem? And when, as you very aptly mentioned previously, spiritual, there has to be an atmosphere of spiritual, almost like prayer, a very reverent, respectful kind of environment where people have come together with goodwill to care about their communities, to care about making decisions through a consultative process that is going to heal and bring well-being to whatever subject from whatever person they have in front of them. So it's a totally different, it hasn't been done before in this way. I mean, it's been done in lots of other ways, but in this particular way, in this time and in this place, the level of maturity, the level of love for Baha'u'llah, you know, it's very hard to love each other. We can be sitting in a room and somebody's got, you know, we all have our own prejudices because we're human beings and we're not made perfect overnight. So what happens is that if we have goodwill, if we're doing our prayers, if we're cleansing ourselves, if we're calling ourselves to account, and we walk into a meeting, the atmosphere of that meeting, though not perfect, because we're kind of in kindergarten practicing consultation, you know, the institutions are still embryonic. So, you know, John, I'm just trying to say it is a process, and it's very, very different from going to a committee meeting. You know, it's very, very different from lots of secular meetings that you go to, where people are there to kind of compete or to get their ideas out or whatever. It is an environment which is unique to this revelation and to Baha'i communities. This kind of environment where consultation can take place, and do not think that there will not be in that consultation the clash of differing opinions, because that is the process which the spark of truth emerges from. In that process, the love and the forgiveness and the degree of maturity in the believers that are meeting to consult on these things is of a very different standard than in committee meetings. Sorry for the preamble. I hope that kind of explains a bit.
I want to add one more thing about unity. I think it was Hooper Dunbar, who said that very often Baha'is think of when we hear the unity. I mean, we've got a unity museum, right? The Baha'is use unity all the time. So when Baha'u'llah talks about unity, what he is not referring to, as you just said lovingly, this kumbaya scene, meaning, oh, we all have to love each other, unity of the community. He says the word, when Baha'u'llah refers to unity, he means that we are all united, we are unified in the belief that Baha'u'llah is a messenger of God for today. And so very often we want to use it as though, oh, we all need to love each other, kumbaya, kumbaya. But really that is not what Baha'u'llah refers to when he talks about unity.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of these ideas. It's really appreciated. So we definitely have something to think about having spoken during today's session. So there's this idea of an institution that has elements for its formation. We have this idea of institution that functions different from any other institution we know about in the world. So the Universal House of Justice does not function the same way that, again, an American Congress would. And comparing the two, unfortunately, won't work when we are to think about how this institution works with a spiritual framework, with how it's to function, with the rules it has, compared to any other institution ever created. And that, of course, includes everywhere around the world, not just, of course, United States. So we have this idea of consultation and the law of consultation, specifically the law of Baha'i consultation, having a redefinition really of what it means to communicate with one another, how we are to communicate with one another in a respectful manner and in a way that is detached, one that is not, again, attached to our own selves, but one that, again, belongs to humanity and its progress, not any particular person being specifically important in that way. There is no single person. It's all of us. So having said that, I think we can move ahead, and we have plenty of room again after we read these quotes for people to go on their own and read, a lot of fertile ground to ask good questions and learn more offline. With that being said, I don't see quote 8, Jeremiah. Oh, that's not quote 8. Is that the next one?
Yes, that's the next one.
Okay, so it's cut off, the text on the top. Can I read it properly to say, from His Holiness, Guardian of the Cause of God?
Until the local and national assemblies are fully, regularly, and legally constituted and operational, the establishment of the Universal House of Justice, to which all things must be referred, and which, according to the categorical divine text, is the enactor of those ordinances and regulations that are not expressly recorded in the book, will be impossible inasmuch as its election, according to the explicit text of the sacred will and testament, must be by means of the secondary House of Justice. He says that is, in all countries, a secondary House of Justice must be instituted, and these secondary houses of justice must elect the members of the universal one. I'll just read what it says in the bottom. The exact comes from a letter of the Guardian, dated February 27th, 1923, to the Baha'is of the East. There you have it.
Sorry, I'm a bit vocal today, but I'd just like to clarify. People may misunderstand about secondary houses of justice. Justice, they're actually our national assemblies at this point. But as they evolve, they are embryonic institutions. They will become houses of justice secondary to the Universal House of Justice. Just a point of clarification. Thank you.
Where did you read that? I have not ever heard that national assemblies will be equal to the station of the House.
No, sorry, Sabine. Can I please clarify to you? I wasn't saying that. I said that here it refers must by the means of secondary houses of justice, which are national spiritual assemblies at this embryonic time. But in the future, they will become houses of, not houses of justice, houses of justice under the auspice of the Universal House of, like each National Assembly will become a local house of justice, right? So, but never, I mean, a local house of justice, not the universal house of justice, if you get my meaning. So I'm not saying, God, yeah. I'm not saying that. But you see, because our institutions are still in their embryonic state, and even locally in the future, we will have local houses of justice.
That's what I was just going to say. That's just like the local. No, it's the same thing.
Thank you for clarifying that. I would hate to.
I'm thinking what's going to happen with the local houses of justice would be similar to the U.S. court system. You have your circuit court, your regional court, and you have your state Supreme Court, and then you have your federal court system, and you have the United States Supreme Court, but there's supposed to be an international tribunal, which is supposed to have supremacy over all the international courts. Similarly, we're talking about the Universal House of Justice. The Universal House of Justice will be the supreme institution on this planet. The Universal House of Justice will have planet-wide authority for the planet Earth. Now, until we start, going to other planets, and I'm sure other planets will have their own planetary system and such. But, internationally, you're talking about the Universal House of Justice will be supreme here on the planet Earth. And then you have your national and regional assemblies, because I think it's interesting that you had your regional councils that were set up back around, I think, like 1990 something, was supposed to be, according to the Abdu'l-Baha tablet of the divine plan, southeastern states, northeastern states, central states, and all that kind of stuff. And those were supposed to be subservient to the National Assembly. So we're probably talking, future houses of justice that will happen. I don't know, probably not in our lifetimes, but probably 200, 300 years down the road, when the membership of the Baha'i faith reached critical mass. And to me, critical mass would be in excess of 2 billion believers out of 8 billion people on the planet. But that's just an observation.
I want to add to that, because it's just come up for discussion at the museum with some of our university law students. We and you didn't mention, so I just want to make mention here. We have the ICC, that means it's the International Court System in The Hague. And if you study the tablet to The Hague, you will find there is it's a brilliant tablet. It shows where the future with the international court systems are going. And so therefore, as you notice, even Akavan was a member of the Hague during the arrest of Milosevic, right? Milosevic died before justice was served, but the ICC already has an arrest out on Putin and is thinking about Netanyahu. So I think we are looking at the unfoldment of an international court system that is being pretty well in motion. And I feel that as we are looking even today at what's going on in the world, I think that future ICC will play a very pertinent role. And not saying that, because it certainly has the blessing of the faith. I mean, when you read that tablet to The Hague, it really gives you a glimpse of the justice in the future.
And could I just add to that, Sabine? If you've been, you have the Tablet of The Hague, which I think that every Baha'i that's very aware at the moment have been pulling out the Tablet of The Hague, because the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is under breaking point. It's under breaking point because states are leaving the ICC, because there's controversy in regards to power play. So my point is, whilst that is a model, and Baha'is have served, like the gentleman that you mentioned for human rights, amazing man, we are sitting right now today in a critical point where will the international court be upheld? That's how bad this dilemma really is, because for the last month, I've been researching. I've attended universities all around America virtually to find out for myself, to see truth through my own eyes, because I think that to be indifferent to what's going on, to the suffering in all these countries, and not to get into bipartisan politics, but from a humanitarian and, an Abdul Baharish, concern for oppression, we need to be careful. But there is consternation in America, throughout the whole world, about will the the International Criminal Court actually exist in the next 6 months. So fingers crossed have been and prayers up.
I don't. I think I view it differently. That even in the beginning, we've had, for instance, national assemblies that were shut down for a while, right? And the United States is not really interested in United Nations and all these discussions of what I call the international collaboration of decision making. I feel we are basically right now witnessing the collapse of the opposition, power struggle and opposition to the idea of an international body. That is just part of the way the process is unfolding. Just because people don't like it and they fight it and they want to sort of beat it and come up with their own idea, I think that the idea of an international, when you read the tablet of The Hague, I feel quite confirmed it will take time. It is way too early. It's just been basically a few years. And even the idea of the Universal House of Justice being infallible in the eyes of the world, I think, to me, it's just a process. It's not it's going to go away and we're going to lose it. They're going to lose its power. And so, of course, the likes of Putin and others, and even Milosevic. If you talk to our friend, when they first, came and arrested Milosevic, the world was aghast. And the reason why United States, it doesn't want to be in part of any of that. And so there's a lot of opposition to it. But to me, that is just a process that in time, the grassroots, it's the struggle from United Nations to World Federation. It's the same thing. And so therefore, the process into the idea of World Federation is complicated because it has military decision-making behind it. It's very complex. And so therefore, it is the school of a road of hard knocks. But I think it is ultimately, it will stand and it will be firm, because the idea when you read the tablet of The Hague, like the World Peace Statements, right? When you read them, then you know that it has hiccups. It's way too early to say.
Yes, well, Sabine, I agree with that, but I just would like to point that it's at a critical juncture, and that I have read the tablet of The Hague, and I know that one day that will be so. My point is that they may have to reconfigure. They may have to reconfigure what that looks like. And the fact is, at the moment, there is a lot of consternation in the ICC itself in regards to, arrest warrants being put out and countries hiding or saying, oh, you can come here, so-and-so. I'm not mentioning who, we all know who. But my point being this, the greatest thing that I've seen in my experience recently, virtually going to university, is the groundswell from people who are like-minded with the same concepts as the Baha'i faith has in terms of peace, of fairness and justice. And my belief is that this generation of youth and ongoing will actually, it will be the massive people that reinforce the need for an international criminal court and the United Nations from, a process of evolution from Abdu'l-Baha's tablets from The Hague. But thank you. I didn't know how many people were really, very concerned about this critical juncture. Thank you.
So if there aren't any other thoughts or
Well,
comments, I guess we can move on.
Yes. Jeremiah. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
go ahead, John. Your connection's breaking up.
So something. Oh, really? How about now?
Okay, you're good now.
I think it's fine. So as we were looking at this idea of this unfolding vision and what we see in the world today. What we see in the world today, it's a collection of treaties, organizations based on contracts between countries. Contracts are only as powerful as the means of enforcement. There is no means of enforcement by an international body because there is not one that exists. The international bodies that exist, which you find in the world, again, are born of private contract between countries. That means you could have Joe and Larry enter into a contract, verbal or written, and say they're going to do something. It's only as powerful an agreement as their choice to honor that agreement. Likewise, nations can choose to honor agreements or not. So how does the Baha'i writings come into this? We believe in the idea of a world commonwealth that is founded on federal principles. Now, the closest that as an American in the United States I can think of in terms of federal government, it would be the United States of America and the concept of independent countries known as states that make up the United States, abiding by one federal government's rule, providing a sliver of their power that they have to an international government, the federal government, to run certain affairs on their behalf. So that means in this case, if the world were to have a federal system, so too, as you would find in the United States, with a world that is, again, a world commonwealth that's federal in nature, would have some of those specific powers sacrificed from each of those member governments to a federal government that is, again, in its nature, an international government. So there are, in this current age, some regional bloc governments. Again, the United States of America is an international government, which is fundamentally linking 50 separate states as representative members of a single government. Likewise, in the world, you have some unions, such as the European Union, that have been formed with limited powers as well. The takeaway here is, if we're going to see an international commonwealth where you have international courts, international bodies that engage in various affairs for the betterment of humanity, not just any single government, that is something that will require the world considering the acknowledgement of and the adoption of federal principles in governance. And we don't just mean in nationalities, the nation states that we have. We're talking an international body that is the whole world. So one last point, when we talk about this idea of an international community that we belong to, when we look at the news and we see independent nations choosing to do things that's best for their own country, be it the United States choosing its own direction versus another country's well-being, that is what traditionally has been the case for a nation, to choose its own benefit over any other nation. This idea of choosing the benefit of other nations as well as one's own is a concept that's rather new. And this idea of an international commonwealth where we all care about everyone in the planet, that idea, for it to truly be legal, we need to form it. That idea doesn't have to be a good thought. That idea, which is a good thought, can turn into law, but you have to give an enforcement power to an international agency to do that, without which there will be no governance internationally. You'll have independent states choosing, as you see today, their own benefit over other nation states, because the president of any country, their only responsibility is to their own people. They don't owe a responsibility to other governments unless there is some mutual interest involved, such as a transaction, which again goes back to treaties and contracts. What is the transaction or the trade between nations? So I know that this was a subject that took a bit to explain, but there is so much more that one could be learning about this. When Abdu'l-Baha came to America, one of the concepts that he encouraged American statesmen, if they wished to help the world to really engage in, is spreading the concept of federalism. And you can find this in stories of Abdu'l-Baha as well as some of his writings, the description of the need to understand federalism as a planet and having that as the basis for a world government. Yeah, Jeremiah, I think we're good to go to the next slide. So I see there's a little quote on top and then the bigger one in the bottom. We could read them both together, you think?
Sure, I'll go ahead and read it. When the universal house of justice is established, whatsoever it decideth is of God, and under the protection, shelter, and unerring guidance of the Alpa Beauty. The purpose of the repeated emphatic assertions concerning the need to strengthen and support the spiritual assemblies was that on the basis of these assemblies, the divine houses of justice might be securely established, and upon these national houses of justice, the majestic edifice of the universal house of justice might, without let or hindrance, be reared in the utmost orderliness, regularity, perfection, and glory. Then, when the universal house of justice emerges from the realm of hope into that of visibility and fact, and its fame is exalted and celebrated throughout all the climes and regions, this august body, which reposes and is established upon the firm and strong foundation of the entire Baha'i community in both the East and the West, and which is sustained and assisted by divine inspiration, will set about devising and implementing consummate enactments, universal enterprises, and illustrious undertakings by means of which the fame of the cause of God will become world encompassing and its light world illuminating. So, anyone have any thoughts or comments or questions?
Yes, I do. I was just looking at the fact that this is like the pillars of a building, isn't it? The foundation for them in terms of the structure of a new world option. I'll put it that way. It starts off at the local level with your local assemblies, and they're the bricks for the national assemblies, and the national assemblies are the pillars for the universal house of justice. So also as that develops, there will be in the future, John was talking about law in another subject, but there will be a supreme tribunal. It'll be simply legislative, and it will be in regards to federated states. But my point being that, this is an architecture of absolute majesty, a total evolution in terms of restructuring human society. And here it's describing what that framework looks like. So, you know, I'm just celebrating. I'm fasting, so I'm a bit weird. Thank you.
So do we have any other comments or thoughts from anyone else in the discussion?
So I have a question about this idea of utmost orderliness, regularity, perfection, and glory. Can someone talk about this? What does that mean to have utmost orderliness, regularity, perfection, and glory? Can someone explain?
Oh gosh, sorry, I'm fasting anyway. Like orderly, it's about you know, if you have disorder, well then you can't have good decision making, because if something's disorderly, nothing happens. But the real purpose and import in terms of these you know, the way that these institutions are established is that they meet regularly. They come together through prayer and through in perfect harmony in terms of purpose. And the utmost orderliness is in terms of the structure of their consultation and how the administration of that institution acts. It's got guidelines, it's got bylaws, and it's got a structure within that. So when you have got orderliness, that means that things are structured so that the best kind of coming together, consultation and decision making can be made of a very high order. Therefore, the decision making is extraordinarily elevated, owing to the orderliness and the regularity. The meetings are timed very regular, and the perfection and glory of that is that there's also a spiritual element which guides it. That's just speaking to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. You know, something that still strikes me that's very interesting is this concept that theoretically our leaders could ask and inquire of the Universal House of Justice what the world should do in regards to these conflicts that have gathered so much attention over the past year, 2 years, and that decision would actually solve the problem. And I'm sure it could be done relatively quickly, which is pretty amazing to me. And it's you know, it's sad that that hasn't happened yet. But this discussion tonight has actually changed my perspective on a lot of things. So thank you. If we don't have any other comments or questions, we can go to the next slide, I guess. Depending on the timing. What's our timing at? Yeah, we still have enough time to go through a few more slides. All right. Oh, okay. So we'll be starting the station of man and that of the believer. So it looks like we had been working in a refresher, because we had already gone over those. So can I have a volunteer reader, please?
I'll do it, Jeremiah, because I'm very wordy. Sorry, I think it's I'm paying humility for my wordiness. Lofty is the station of man. Not long ago, this exalted word streamed forth from the treasury of our pen of glory. Great and blessed is this day, the day in which all that lay latent in man hath been made and will be made manifest. Lofty is the station of man. Were he to hold fast to righteousness and truth, and to remain firm and steadfast in the cause, in the eyes of the all-merciful, a true man appeareth, even as a firmament. Its sun and moon are his sight and hearing, and his shining and resplendent character, its stars. He is the loftiest station, and his influence educateth the world of being. Kitabi Hadi, Covenant, page 135. Beautiful.
So are there any specific thoughts in regards to this?
Sorry, truth. I think when it's looking at what this looks like, what kind of lofty station for this human being, righteousness and truth. And there are tablets and tablets of Baha'u'llahs. I've just been recently reading about truthfulness again, and it is so important. The attribute of truth, and also under duress being firm and steadfast. So those elements being mentioned, this lofty station, the elements are righteousness, truth, firmness, steadfastness, in the cause, no matter what. So it's really giving a description of what, human beings, well, it says man, but it means, humankind, what the attributes are that are worthy of us as being able to call ourselves human, as opposed to the state, the animal condition. So it's really a lovely description. Thank you.
So I think we've got quite a bit going on here. Now, what does it mean to be a true man?
John, I apologize, but I'm having a problem with my computer's battery, and unfortunately, this Zoom session might cut out. So I think it's better that we probably get ready to close out.
Okay, yeah. So let's have a closing prayer. Can someone offer a closing prayer tonight, please?
Please.
It would be beautiful. If we could have a volunteer, please. Okay, Sharon or let's see, Gregory, Hushang, Kamran. One of you guys want to volunteer a closing prayer? Armin?
I'll just do it before it cuts out. Is that okay? Sorry, I'm so wordy.
somebody-
Apologies.
Please, please.
Please go ahead.
O thou incomparable God, O thou Lord of the kingdom, these souls are thy heavenly army. Assist them, and with the cohorts of the supreme concourse, make them victorious, so that each one of them may become like unto a regiment and conquer these countries through the love of God and the illumination of divine teachings. O God, be thou supporter and their helper, and in the wilderness, the mountain, the valley, the forest, the prairies, and the seas, be thou their confidant, so that they may cry out through the power of the kingdom and the breath of the Holy Spirit. Verily, thou art the powerful, the mighty, and the omnipotent, and thou art the wise, the hearing, and the seeing. Ya Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, friends. I apologize for ending the session early tonight. We thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Same